Hey guys, and welcome to my early analysis on the first collab characters in NIKKE. For those who are not aware, we will soon be getting a Chainsaw Man collab that will bring in 3 new characters, namely Makima, Power, and Himeno. There is no official information about how to get each of the characters, but by the looks of it, Makima and Power will have their own limited time banner, and Himeno will be from an event. Aside from that, I also want to mention that all of these characters will have the same voice actor from the anime, just in case that is something that matters to you. We will be going over each of the characters' kit to see if they are potentially good for your teams and to see how they will function as units. Do keep in mind that these are still subject to change, but as we have seen from previous characters that were also leaked, any changes made will not be too drastic and the character will essentially work the same way on release. If anything, any of the changes that will be made will most likely be for the number values and their skills. If you want to check out this information yourself, I will be sure to leave a link in the description so you can also be updated about this information. Also let me know how you feel about this first NIKKE collab. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. But with that being said, we have quite a few characters to cover, so let's jump right in. First up, we have Makima. She is a burst type 2 defender that will be using an SMG, and Makima, along with the other collab characters, will have the abnormal manufacturer attack. This is sort of a big deal because it means that they won't be affected by the manufacturer's specific upgrades in their recycling room. Makima's first ability is a passive skill that will activate whenever she is attacked 20 times. This will increase the reload speed for her team by 36.96% at level 10, and it will also increase the team's defense by 14.78%. The effects from her skill 1 will last for 10 seconds. This ability works well with Makima's kit as you will see from her other abilities, but how often you can activate this depends on the stage. You can easily activate it when you are in PvP, especially if she happens to be in your first slot. But if you are against bosses that have a low attack volume, or maybe you're using another character with a taunt, then Makima's first ability might not proc that often. Of course, you can use characters like Jackal, who can give Makima a shared damage effect to make her take more hits. But even then, you still need to set up your team in a way that Makima will be the one affected by the shared damage passive instead of the other characters. But if you happen to have the right stats and Makima is affected by Jackal's damage sharing, then I can see the two of them working very well. The reload speed buff from this ability is pretty good because it's more than half of what Privacy has. And comparing the skill conditions, Makima's reload speed buff can be triggered more often in the right scenarios, but generally, I would expect this to proc not too often, but often enough for you to have the reload speed buff from both Makima and Privacy simultaneously. And because of the reload speed buff, Makima can potentially be a good support for Scarlet because the only other burst 1 character that has a reload speed buff is Winter Ruby, and she is not the easiest character to work with to say the least. And then we also have the defense buff, which is kind of just whatever because many of you might already know that defense increase is really not that good for most cases. It's barely noticeable for small hits of damage and it's very insignificant when it comes to bigger hits. So I would have preferred to have a totally different buff, maybe something like HP potency or simply just attack percent. Moving on to her skill 2. This is another passive skill that will activate after Makima lands 120 normal attacks, and this will make her taunt all of your enemies for 3 seconds. This ability can help Makima trigger her skill 1, and the good thing is that the taunt effect will only last for 3 seconds, so it's enough to divert the enemies away from your other units, and at the same time, it's not necessarily long enough that it will take her out. Her second skill also has a second effect that activates when Makima takes lethal damage. This will give her invincibility for 7 seconds, on top of reducing the cooldown for her burst by 11.58 seconds. The invincibility effect is very useful and something that I've been looking for a defender. Makima will be taunting her enemies frequently, so having this as a safety net when she gets overwhelmed is really nice to have. Moving on to Makima's burst. This has a 20-second cooldown and a water damage type. When activated, this will give Makima a pierce effect for 10 seconds, which means that her attacks can go through enemies. On top of that, she will also be recovering 34.02% of attack damage as HP over 10 seconds. If that was not enough, this ability also has a second effect that will give Makima an HP potency buff when she uses her burst whenever she is invincible. This will help her heal more, not just from her burst but also from other healers because this is a flat out healing increase. Makima's burst can be pretty broken in stages with high enemy density because the pierce effect combined with lifesteal basically means that she can fire in a straight line, and if she hits more than one enemy at the same time, she will be getting more healing. Lifesteal is definitely a useful ability for tanks, especially in the case of Makima and how her kit works as a whole. So overall, I am pretty optimistic about Makima. It seems like we are finally getting a functional tank outside of noise because Makima has a taunt, but she also has good healing that will help her get back some of her HP. Before we move on to the next character, I do want to mention that if you are pulling for characters like Makima, where you are only after their supportive utility, these types of characters are really not worth getting multiple copies of because it doesn't do much for their main utility. But if you really like the character, or maybe you need more characters with max limit break, or maybe you simply want to get their live wallpaper, then by all means go for it. And next up we have Power. She is a burst type 3 DPS that will be using a rocket launcher. Her skill 1 is a passive skill that activates when killing an enemy. This will give her a stack of Blood Fiend, which will increase her attack by 3.84%, and this can stack up to 5 times with a 5-second duration. This is overall a really good skill because attack increase is one of the better buffs in the game. But with that said, this ability only gets more value in PvE because you kill enemies more often, letting Power get the stacks quicker, compared to PvP where it's less frequent, and after you kill 5 enemies, the round is basically over. Her skill 2 is a passive skill that activates after she lands 20 normal attacks whenever she has the maximum stacks for her Blood Fiend passive. This will increase Power's explosion radius by 19.3% for 10 seconds, so her normal attacks will basically have bigger AoE. On top of that, this will also reload 100% of her ammo. Just like her skill 1, this ability is pretty much only useful in PvE. You need to have maximum stacks on her skill 1, which means that you need to kill at least 5 enemies, so that immediately takes PvP out of the picture. For PvE, yes, this ability is good, and it gives Power really good buffs, but it only activates once per battle. So I would say that this should be fine in stages that are quick, but the longer the fight is, the worse it gets, because Power will basically be losing one skill after this activates one time. Now moving on to her burst. This has a 40-second cooldown in the fire damage type, and this will affect one enemy with the highest attack, dealing an insane 1584% of her attack as damage. If that was not enough, this will basically double the damage if Power has her Blood Fiend passive fully stacked. The scaling on her burst is just insane. 3168% damage is obviously broken, so I wouldn't be surprised if this gets adjusted before she gets released. But if the value is anywhere close to this when she gets released, it's possible that she can be a top tier unit for bosses. So overall, Power's kit is pretty much what you would expect from a burst 3 DPS. The damage scaling on her skill 1 and 2 is pretty low compared to the other units that we have now, but this is compensated by her insane burst damage scaling. And next up we have Himeno. There was not any official information yet about how to get her, but we do have this event banner art for her, and it says Battle Pass, so some people are speculating that she will be the reward for the last level for the new event Battle Pass. But this could also be a design choice, where they wanted to include Himeno in one of the event arts, and then she will actually end up like Neve, where players can get her at the end of the event mission or story. Himeno is a burst type 2 support and she will be using a sniper rifle. But unlike Power and Makima, Himeno is supposed to be an SR character. But I'm kind of confused because she has a burst animation, but I guess we just have to wait and see until we get more information about this. Her skill 1 activates when she hits a target with a fully charged attack. This will decrease the target's defense by 6.94% at level 10. This is kind of just whatever, simply because defense shred in NIKKE is really not that good because of how the damage calculation works. It also scales pretty low, so I would say that once you get her, it's safe to leave this ability not leveled. Moving on to her skill 2, Invisible Hand. This one has a 20-second cooldown and a wind damage type. This will increase the attack for all of your sniper units by 10.98% for 10 seconds, as well as increasing their max ammo capacity by 2 rounds for the same duration. This ability is actually pretty good. A 10% attack buff is good enough, considering that this only comes from her skill 2, and it also applies to all of your sniper allies. There is really not much to say. Decent scaling, good for snipers, fairly long duration, everyone's happy. Himeno's burst has a 20-second cooldown, and it will affect one of your allies with the highest attack. It will increase their charge attack damage by 23.76%, as well as increasing their critical rate by 16.35%, and these two effects will last for 10 seconds. Overall, Himeno's kit is much more simple, niche, and straightforward compared to the other characters we covered. She will be a really good support for sniper rifle teams, so if that's the main team you're running, then you will definitely use her in your teams. And if you were not around during the winter event, they also gave us a free character with free limit breaks, so if that happens again, it will be good news for the newer players. All in all, I am most excited for Makima. For the longest time, I have been waiting for a functional tank unit, and by the looks of it, Makima definitely has potential. And of course, I'm also excited for Power and Himeno. The only thing is that their kits are pretty straightforward, but if that's your type of character, then more power to you. With that being said, that's about everything I have for the first collab characters in NIKKE. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. As always, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.